Hello to the learner. It is good to have you with us. We are diving into a subject today that is, well, it's arguably the most pervasive force in your life, yet it is something you likely rarely stop to examine.
It really is. It dictates how you dress, how you speak, how you eat, even how you think about right and wrong.
It's the invisible architecture of human existence.
That's the perfect way to put it. We move through it like fish move through water, completely unaware that the water is even there until something, disrupts the current.
Before we start mapping out this architecture, I do need to set the stage properly. Welcome back. Just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM, designed for a deeper, more dynamic analysis of the texts we love.
And we're here to act as your guides through some fairly dense material, helping to extract the signal from the noise.
It is a privilege to be here, and honestly, for the topic we are tackling today, this format feels ideal.
I agree. We need to be able to pause, reflect, and really dissect these ideas because they are not just abstract philosophy. They are the operating system of society.
So I want to start with a question for you, the listener, and not a rhetorical one, a genuine one. Why do you do the things you do?
And we're not talking about biology.
No, not why you eat when you're hungry or sleep when you're tired. I'm asking about the other stuff. Why do you shake hands when you meet a stranger? Why do you feel a twinge of embarrassment if you wear the wrong outfit to a party?
Or why do we drive on a specific side of the road? The right side here, the left side in the UK or Japan. Is that behavior written into your genetic code?
Of course not. So what is it? Is it nature or is it just an agreement?
That is the fundamental question of anthropology, of political philosophy. It's the question we're exploring today.
We are exploring the essay on custom and convention from Mortimer Adler's Syntopicon analysis. Now, the Syntopicon is a massive undertaking. For those who might not be familiar with it, this is not just an essay collection.
No, it's much more. It's an index of the great ideas of the Western world. It is, in essence, a catalog of the conversation that has been raging for 3,000 years.
A map.
Precisely. The Syntopicon is a map. It connects the dots between Plato, Aristotle, Montaigne, Rousseau, all the heavy hitters. It shows us where they agreed, where they fought, and how the definitions of our most basic concepts have shifted over centuries.
And today, we're zooming in on one specific node on that map, the part that deals with how we organize our collective lives.
So our mission, our goal for this deep dive, is to uncover these invisible forces of custom and convention.
We want to understand that tension between nature, what has to be, and agreement, what we simply decided should be. Because, and I think this is where the essay gets really provocative, this isn't just about table manners.
No, it's about authority. It's about power.
It's about whether we are free.
Exactly. If the rules we live by are just arbitrary agreements, then we have the power to change them. If they're fixed by nature, well, then we're stuck with them. Understanding the difference is the first step toward any kind of intellectual freedom.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We have to define our terms because in casual conversation, I feel like people use custom and convention almost as synonyms. I might say, it's a custom to tip the waiter, or it's a social convention to tip. Is there actually a meaningful difference in the essay?
Adler's analysis draws a very distinct separation, and it's crucial we get this right from the outset. Let's start with custom. Custom is tied to the concept of habit. It's something that is deeply ingrained, often unconscious.
So it's a practice rooted in tradition, in repetition.
Yes. It's the path worn into the grass because thousands of feet have walked there before. That's a perfect image for it. Custom operates on the level of this is just what we do.
And it's rarely written down in a rule book.
Almost never. It's transmitted through imitation, through osmosis. You watch your parents, you watch your neighbors, and you adopt their behaviors without ever explicitly agreeing to them. It feels almost biological, even though it isn't.
Okay, that makes sense. Custom is the unwritten, ingrained stuff. So then how does convention differ?
The word convention gives us a clue. It comes from the Latin convenire, which means to come together. A convention implies a pact, a contract, an explicit agreement.
So it's a rule that has been proposed and accepted, consciously.
Consciously. A law is the most formal type of convention. But so are the rules of a game. In baseball, the rule that says 3 strikes and you're out is a pure convention.
Right. There is nothing in nature that says 3 strikes is the magical limit.
Nothing at all. It could have been 4. It could have been 2. We as a group came together and agreed on 3 to make the game work. It's an artificial construct designed for a specific purpose.
Let's try another example, maybe a bigger one. What about money? The paper bill in my wallet, or, more realistically, the digital number in my bank account, has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it. You can't build a shelter with it.
Its value is purely a convention. That is a perfect example. We all agree that this piece of paper or this digital signal represents value. It works only because we all believe it works.
It's a shared fiction.
A very powerful, very useful shared fiction. But a fiction nonetheless. It is a nomos, a construct. But here is where it gets tricky, and I think you were heading in this direction earlier. The concepts start to bleed.
Right, because I wanted to push back on this clean separation. The essay seems to imply these things flow into each other, for example, stopping at a red light.
Okay, let's break that down.
The rule itself is a convention. It's written in the traffic laws. Someone, somewhere, decided red means stop, green means go. We all agreed to it.
Clear-cut convention.
But if I'm driving at 3 in the morning on a completely deserted highway and I see a red light, I stop. And if I were to just blow through it, I would feel a physical sensation of wrongness. My heart rate might spike. I'd check the rearview mirror. That reaction feels different. It feels like habit.
You've just hit on the core mechanism of social control. The rule starts as a convention, an external conscious agreement. But through repetition, through training, through seeing everyone else do it, it becomes a custom.
It becomes an internal habit.
Exactly. You no longer stop because you are consciously recalling the agreement, red means stop. You stop because your nervous system has been trained to react to that red stimulus. The external rule has been internalized.
So the convention is the software code, but the custom is when that code gets hardwired into the machine, into our brains.
That is a fair and very modern assessment of it.
Oh.
And this is precisely why the essay argues that the debate isn't just about definitions, it's about authority. Where does the power of that red light really come from?
Does it come from the fear of the police, which is the enforcement of the convention?
Or does it come from that unwritten force of social pressure and ingrained habit? That feeling of wrongness you described?
The essay suggests that the unwritten force is often much, much stronger than the written law.
Think about it. You can evade the police. It is much harder to evade the feeling of shame or the fear of looking like a reckless person, a weirdo, in front of your community.
That internal police officer is always on duty.
Always. And this distinction between the natural and the agreed upon, the internal and the external, it takes us right back to the very foundation of Western philosophy. We need to go to ancient Greece.
Right. You cannot really understand this essay without grappling with two Greek words that appear over and over again in the Syntopicon, physis and nomos.
Let's break them down carefully. Physis.
It sounds like physics.
That's exactly the root. Physis refers to nature, with a capital M. It's reality. It's the way things are, regardless of what humans think or do. Fire burns in Greece, and fire burns in Persia. That's physis.
It's immutable, it's objective, it's the laws of the universe.
Correct. Now, nomos.
Nomos is everything else.
Essentially, nomos is law, custom, or convention. It's everything that depends on human agreement, human minds. Language is nomos. Currency is nomos. Fashion is nomos.
And the key characteristic of nomos is that it varies. It's culturally specific.
That's the telltale sign. In Greece, you might bury your dead. In India, you might cremate them. The fact that the practice changes depending on where you are proves it is nomos, not physis. There is no natural way to dispose of a body.
Okay, so physis is what's given, nomos is what's made. Why does this distinction matter so much? Why is the essay obsessed with separating nature from convention?
Because the entire history of political liberty is essentially the history of people realizing that things they thought were physis were actually nomos.
Whoa, okay, unpack that. That's a big statement.
Think about the divine right of kings. For centuries, most people in Europe believed that the social hierarchy was physis. The king was naturally superior to the peasant, just as a lion is naturally stronger than a gazelle.
It wasn't a political arrangement. It was the natural order of the universe, ordained by God.
Exactly. So if you rebelled against the king, you weren't just breaking a law, nomos. In your mind and in everyone else's, you were fighting against reality itself. You were fighting physis, an act of insanity.
But then something changed.
Then thinkers started to question this. They started to say, wait a minute, the king is just a man. He eats, he sleeps, he bleeds just like the rest of us. His power isn't natural, it's a convention.
We agreed to give him power, or our ancestors did.
And if we agreed to it, we can unagree to it.
Yeah.
Once you realize the king's power is nomos, you realize it can be changed. You can tear up the agreement and write a new one. A constitution, perhaps.
That is the red pill moment from The Matrix. Once you see the code, the green dripping text, you can rewrite it.
And this brings us directly to the Sophists. The essay spends a lot of time on this group of thinkers, and for good reason.
In pop culture, sophistry has a negative connotation. It means tricking people with clever but misleading arguments. But in the context of this essay, they seem much more important.
They were revolutionaries. The Sophists were the original cultural relativists. They were traveling teachers who moved from city-state to city-state, Athens, Sparta, Thebes. And because they traveled, they saw something the locals couldn't see.
They saw that justice in Athens looked very different from justice in Sparta.
Absolutely. The local Athenian thinks, our laws are universal. They are the laws of the gods. They are physis. The sophist arrives and says, actually, your laws are just the laws of Athens. Down the road in Sparta, they do it completely differently, and they think their laws are from the gods.
That must have been an incredibly disruptive, even dangerous idea to introduce.
It was world-shattering. They weaponized the distinction between physis and nomos. They argued that most of what we call morality or justice is just nomos, arbitrary rules invented by humans to serve their own interests.
And some of them went to a pretty dark place with this.
They did. Look at the character Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic. He shows up and just drops a bomb on the whole conversation. He argues that justice is nothing else than the interests of the stronger.
That's an incredibly cynical take. He is saying that the convention of justice isn't some noble agreement for the common good.
Not at all. He's saying it's a scam, a tool. The people in power create the laws, the nomos, and they call it justice. But really, it's just a set of rules designed to keep them in power and keep the weak in line.
So when the law says, thou shalt not steal, it's really the rich saying, you shall not steal our stuff.
That's the Thrasymachus view. And then you have another figure, Callicles, who makes an even more radical argument. He flips it.
Ah, so?
Callicles argues that physis nature truly dictates that the strong should rule the weak. The lion should eat the lamb. That's the law of nature.
Okay, a sort of might makes right philosophy.
But he says the weak, being numerous, realized they couldn't win a fair fight. So they got together and invented nomos, all these laws and moral codes about equality and fairness, as a trick.
So for Callicles, convention is a conspiracy of the weak to shackle the naturally strong.
A brilliant, terrifying reversal of the whole concept. He argues that conventional morality is unnatural. It's a cage built by the mediocre to hold back the excellent.
This sounds uncomfortably like some political arguments we still hear today. But the core insight from all the sophists is that laws are not sacred. They are tools.
They are tools. And if they are tools, we are forced to ask, who built them and who are they working for? This is the Pandora's box the sophists opened.
And it created a huge problem.
A massive one. Because if everything is just nomos, if there is no objective truth or justice physis to appeal to, then society is just a raw power struggle. There's no right. There is only who is winning.
This is what terrified philosophers like Plato.
It was his life's work to counter this. He spent his entire career trying to prove that justice was, in fact, physis, that it was a real, eternal, objective truth, not just a temporary agreement between people in a specific city. He was trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
It feels like we are still having that exact same fight today. Are human rights universal truths endowed by our nature, physis, or are they just a nice idea we all agreed to in 1948, nomos?
That is the central question, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If human rights are nomos, they can be repealed by a majority vote. If they are physis, they are unalienable. They exist whether government recognizes them or not.
This is a deep rabbit hole. I want to pivot back to the mechanism, though, the how. We mentioned earlier that laws become habits. The essay brings Aristotle in here to explain this process more systematically. He introduces the concept of ethos.
Yes. If Plato is the idealist trying to find truth in the heavens, Aristotle is the great systematizer, the biologist looking at the world as it is. He sees the chaos the sophists created and tries to build a stable structure for society.
And he does this by making a key distinction between nomos and ethos.
Right. Nomos is the law, the external rule. Ethos is habit or character. Our word ethics comes directly from ethos.
But isn't ethos usually defined as a person's character? You know, he has a good character.
For Aristotle, that's exactly what it is. But character isn't something you're born with. Character is nothing more than long-standing habit. He famously said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit."
So he's asking a very practical question. How does a nomos become an ethos? How does an external rule become an internal trait of character?
That is the project of civilization for Aristotle. It's the process of internalization.
And how does that happen?
It happens through practice. A legislator makes a law against stealing. That's nomos.
Hmm.
But a law that everyone hates and only follows when a policeman is watching is a weak, unstable law.
A stable society needs its citizens to not even want to steal.
Precisely. It needs the law to become ethos. It needs the citizens to internalize the value behind the law to make it a part of their character. So you train them from childhood. You tell them stories about honesty. You praise honest behavior and punish dishonest behavior.
So parenting, education, religion, social pressure, these
Yeah.
are all the mechanisms designed to convert nomos into ethos.
They are the factories of custom. And here is where it gets psychologically fascinating and a little bit scary. The essay discusses what it calls the tyranny of unexamined tradition.
What does that mean?
When nomos successfully becomes ethos, when the internalization is complete, we forget it was ever a law in the first place. We forget it was an agreement. We start to think it's nature.
We start to think this is just how good people behave. We confuse the map for the territory.
We do, and we punish those who deviate with incredible force. The essay mentions the intense social pressure to conform. This is not just about avoiding a legal fine. It is about the terror of ostracism.
The fear of being kicked out of the tribe.
Humans are social animals. Our physis, our biology, dictates that we need the group to survive. For our ancient ancestors, being cast out of the group was a death sentence. So when the group convention says jump, our deep biological instinct says how high, because being left behind means death.
This sounds like the ultimate form of mind control. You don't need a dictator with an army if you have strong enough customs. The people police themselves.
That is the efficiency of custom. But it's also its potential for tragedy, because it blinds us to other possibilities. It makes the walls of our prison invisible.
Speaking of being blinded and seeing possibilities, I think this is a good moment to pause and reflect on how we actually process this kind of information.
A moment to step back.
Exactly. Speaking of reflection and understanding the deeper mechanics of our world, we want to mention Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques inspiring reflection and rational thought.
It really is a resource designed to help you do exactly what we are attempting here. Stepping back from the constant stream of information to ask, is this true? Is this serving me? Or is this just noise?
And in the context of our discussion today, rational thought is the only tool we have to distinguish physis from nomos.
It's the flashlight in the dark. Without that pause for reflection, we are just running on the autopilot of custom.
We are back. We left off talking about the tyranny of unexamined tradition, and the essay argues there is no better image for this in the entire Western canon than Plato's allegory of the cave.
It's a perfect metaphor, and it's explicitly linked to this idea of custom in Adler's analysis. We should take a moment to really visualize this, because it is more than just a dusty philosophy classroom example. It is a horror story about the human condition.
So set the scene for us. We're not just sitting in a room, we're prisoners.
You are in a dark cave.
Yeah.
You are chained by your legs and your neck, facing a flat wall. You have been there since childhood. You cannot turn your head. It is all you have ever known.
So my entire world is this one stone wall in front of me.
That is your entire universe. Now, behind you, there is a fire burning, casting a faint light. And between the fire and your back, there's a raised walkway. People walk along this walkway carrying object puppets, really. Statues of men, animals, trees, tools.
And the fire casts the shadows of these puppet objects onto the wall in front of me.
Exactly. You, the prisoner, see a shadow of a bird flit across the wall. You hear a voice from one of the puppet masters echo off the wall. You assume the shadow is making the sound. You assume the shadow is the bird.
For me, the shadows are the only reality. They are physis.
They are your reality.
Yeah.
And the other prisoners, they're just like you. You all play games, you name the shadows, you try to predict which one will come next. And if you're really good at the shadow game, the other prisoners praise you. They say you are wise and clever.
I become a respected expert in shadows.
You do. Now, the essay argues that these shadows are our customs and conventions. The shadow of justice that you see on the wall isn't real justice. It is just the two-dimensional shape your particular society has agreed to cast.
The shadow of success I'm chasing, it isn't real fulfillment. It's just the convention of wealth or fame that our culture projects onto the wall.
That is the core idea. So the tyranny of the cave is that we are living our entire lives fighting over shadows. We are building our identities, our economies, our wars, all based on who owns the most shadows.
And then the story takes a turn. The philosopher, the hero, somehow breaks free from the chains.
Yes. Someone or something releases one prisoner. He is forced to turn around. The fire behind him hurts his eyes. They've only ever known darkness. He's confused. He sees the puppets and realizes the shadows were not the real thing.
And it gets worse for him.
It gets much worse. He is dragged up the rough, steep ascent out of the cave and into the sunlight. The sun represents the truth, the good, the real physis. And it is blindingly painful. He can't see anything at first.
But slowly, his eyes adjust. He sees the real world for the first time. He sees that the bird on the wall was just a shadow of a wooden carving, which itself was just a representation of a real, living bird. He sees the artificiality of the entire cave system.
He has seen the truth. But here is the tragic part, and the part most relevant to our discussion on the power of custom. He goes back down into the cave.
Why would he do that?
Out of a sense of duty. He has to tell the others. He has to free them. But think about what happens. He stumbles back into the dark. His eyes are now adjusted to the brilliant sun, so in the dim light of the cave, he can't see the shadows well at all anymore.
So to the other prisoners, he looks like a fool. He can't even play their game anymore.
They think the journey outside has ruined him, blinded him. He tries to tell them, hey, listen to me. Everything you think is real, it's not. They're just shadows. You are enslaved by illusions.
And they don't say thank you for enlightening us.
They laugh at him, and then they get angry. Plato writes that they would say, if you try to free us, we will kill you.
They would kill him to protect their prison.
That is the terrifying power of convention. We protect our illusions violently. The essay points out that the hardest thing in the world for a human being to do is to question the customs that provide us with our sense of reality and belonging. To tell a society, your gods are fake, or your economic system is arbitrary, or your traditions are unjust, is to invite your own destruction.
It's the clash between the comfort of the familiar cave and the blinding, painful light of reality.
It is. And this leads us directly into the great tension the essay explores next. Reform versus tradition. Because once you realize you are in the cave, you have two choices.
You can try to tear the entire cave down, smash the puppets, and drag everyone into the sun.
Or you could say, well, the cave is dark, but it's predictable. It keeps us safe from the elements. Maybe it's not so bad.
This is the eternal battle between the reformer who trusts reason and the traditionalist who trusts accumulated wisdom. The Syntopicon lays out these two opposing forces beautifully.
Let's start with side A, the reformer, the side of reason.
This is the argument that if a custom is irrational or unjust, we should abolish it. Full stop.
This is the spirit of the Enlightenment, it says. Look, if a custom is just a convention, an agreement, and it is causing suffering or inequality, we have a moral duty to scrap it. Reason is the only legitimate authority. Tradition is not an argument.
The phrase, because we have always done it this way, is, for the reformer, the worst possible reason to continue doing something.
Exactly. And the essay points to Plato's Republic as the most extreme, the most chillingly logical example of this impulse. Plato was a radical reformer. In his design for the ideal city, he looked at the traditional family unit.
The cornerstone of society for most people.
For most, yes. But Plato, the pure rationalist, saw a problem. He saw that people love their own children more than they love the state. They hoard resources for their kids, they practice nepotism, their loyalty is divided.
Which is arguably natural. It feels like physis to love your own kids.
Plato argued it was an obstacle to perfect justice. So, logically, what did he propose?
He proposed abolishing the private family, at least for the guardian class, the rulers.
Completely. Children would be taken from their mothers at birth and raised by the state in a communal nursery. No parent would know their biological child. No child would know their biological parent. Everyone in your generation is your brother and sister. Everyone in your parents' generation is your mother and father.
That sounds absolutely horrific to our modern sensibilities. It sounds like a dystopian nightmare.
It does.
Yeah.
But from a purely logical standpoint, it solves this problem. If you want to create total equality of opportunity and total undivided loyalty to the state, you have to remove the competing loyalty of the family. Plato was willing to crush a foundational human custom to achieve his ideal of justice.
So that is the extreme of reform. What about side B, the case for tradition?
This is the argument you find in thinkers like Montaigne or, more famously, Edmund Burke. They argue that customs are repositories of accumulated wisdom. They are the result of a massive long-term social experiment.
The idea being that a custom is like a fence. You might come across an old fence in a field and not know why it was built. It might look ugly or irrational.
And your first rational impulse might be to tear it down. But the traditionalist, the conservative, would say, wait, before you tear it down, you must first understand why it was put up in the first place.
You might discover it was built to hold back a pack of wolves or to stop cattle from falling off a cliff. The convention survived for a reason, even if we've forgotten what that reason is.
Precisely. They argue that the reason of a single individual, or even a single generation, is fragile and limited. One brilliant person in a room thinking up a new world order is almost certain to miss 1,000 crucial variables.
But custom is different.
Custom is the result of millions of people navigating the complexities of life over thousands of years. It's evolutionary. Bad customs tend to lead to societal collapse. Good ones tend to help societies flourish. It's a form of collective, unarticulated intelligence.
So the traditionalist says, don't mess with the operating system just because you don't understand a few lines of the code. You're more likely to crash the whole system than to improve it.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And then you have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who complicates everything. The essay brings him in as a radical counterpoint to both sides.
Right. Rousseau doesn't want to reform the cave or preserve it. He wants to leave it entirely.
Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. That is his famous opening line. Rousseau argues that our physis, our natural state before society gets its hands on us, is good. We are naturally compassionate, simple, and free.
He's the original noble savage theorist.
He is. And for him, civilization itself, the entire structure of nomos, is the problem. It's society, with its artificial conventions of private property, social hierarchy, and polite etiquette, that corrupts us. It makes us jealous, insecure, deceitful, and competitive.
So Plato wants to use reason to build a stricter, more perfect convention, the ideal city. Burke wants to preserve the existing conventions, and Rousseau wants to strip away all convention to get back to pure nature.
You've just summarized 3,000 years of political philosophy. Rousseau looks at the cave and says, let's get back to the forest where we belong. Plato looks at the cave and says, let's build a better cave with state-of-the-art lighting and ventilation. Burke looks at the cave and says, don't touch the walls, they might be load-bearing.
This tension is fascinating because we see it in every single political debate today. Do we reform the system, or do we trust the wisdom of the past? Do we need more rules to perfect society, or fewer rules to unleash human nature?
And the synthesis the essay points toward, though it's important to say it doesn't give a simple answer, is about finding a balance. Can we have order without tyranny? We need conventions. We cannot live without language or laws or traffic signals. We would be animals.
But how do we prevent those necessary conventions from becoming a cage, from becoming an unthinking, oppressive custom?
We need to stop at the red light to survive traffic. But as you implied earlier, we shouldn't stand at the red light for 3 hours if the light is broken and there's no traffic.
That's the synthesis. We need the ability to follow the rule, nomos, but also the critical thinking to recognize when the rule no longer serves its purpose, which is human flourishing.
And that takes constant vigilance.
So we have covered a lot of ground here. We defined the terms. We saw the ancient Greek battle between reality, physis, and agreement, nomos. We saw how external laws burrow into our brains to become internal habits, ethos. We visited Plato's cave. We watched the great debate between reform and tradition. Now, the big question, so what?
What does this mean for the learner listening to this on their commute or while doing the dishes?
Right. Why should they care about a 2,500-year-old debate?
Because you are living in the middle of it right now. The essay offers 2 massive practical takeaways from this entire exploration: critical thinking and, ultimately, freedom.
Let's break down the critical thinking aspect. The essay mentions this as number-critical thinking.
When you truly internalize the distinction between custom and nature, between nomos and physis, you gain a kind of superpower. You can look at the pressures and anxieties in your own life and ask a simple, powerful question. Is this necessary?
Give me an example. Let's say the intense pressure to follow a specific career path. You must go to college, get a good corporate job, buy a house in the suburbs. Is that physis?
Is it a law of nature? No. It is pure nomos. It is a convention of the 21st century Western middle class. It wasn't true in 1200 AD in feudal Europe, and it might not be true in 2100 AD on a Martian colony.
So once you see it as a convention, you're no longer its slave. You can evaluate it.
You can treat it like a piece of software. Does this program serve me? Does it align with my values? Or am I twisting myself into knots to serve the program? It allows you to audit your own anxieties. How much of your daily stress comes from trying to perfectly satisfy a convention that doesn't actually matter to your well-being?
And this also applies to how we view other cultures. This relates to number, custom, and convention.
Absolutely. We live in a globalized world. You are going to meet people who do things very, very differently. If you unconsciously believe your way of life is physis, that it's the natural way, you will inevitably judge them. You will think they are wrong or weird or unnatural.
But if you realize your way is just your local nomos, your local custom, you can be curious instead of judgmental.
Oh, you organize your family life differently. That's interesting. What are the pros and cons? It kills dogma. It creates intellectual humility. It allows for tolerance without forcing you to abandon your own values. You can say, this is my nomos, and I've chosen it, but I recognize it is not the law of gravity.
I love the idea of auditing your life for what you called dead customs. You use the analogy of the fence that's no longer holding back wolves.
We all have them. Maybe it's a weekly meeting at work that produces no value, but everyone keeps going because it's the weekly meeting. Maybe it's a family obligation that causes only resentment but is maintained out of sheer inertia.
If it is nomos, you can change it. That is the empowering part. You are a co-legislator of your own life. You can write new agreements with yourself and with others.
But, and this is a huge, but that takes courage.
Because, as we learned from the allegory of the cave, if you break the convention, if you stop playing the shadow game, the other prisoners might get very angry.
They will get angry. That is the cost of freedom. Breaking a powerful custom is painful, it can be lonely, but the alternative is to live your whole life as a shadow watcher in a cave.
So we have gone from the invisible architecture of society to the very personal tools of demolition and reconstruction. It has been quite a journey.
It's the journey of philosophy itself, taking what is familiar and making it strange so we can see it clearly for the very first time.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a final, provocative thought to take with them. We have been talking about agreements, conventions, things we participate in because, well, everyone else does.
Here is the challenge to mull over. If our customs are merely human agreements, shadows on a wall, what agreement are you participating in right now in your life that you actually disagree with?
Think about it. Is it a workplace culture of silence on important issues? Is it a consumption habit that you know is destructive? Is it a way of treating other people that doesn't sit right with your conscience?
And here's the hard part of the question. Do you have the courage to treat it as nomos, as something that is changeable, something you can renegotiate? Or will you continue to treat it as physis, as an inevitable law of nature because it is safer and more comfortable to stay in the cave?
The courage to see the choice. That is the ultimate takeaway. If you want to explore these ideas further, click the link on screen for more on this and other essay subjects. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and above all, think rationally.
Absolutely. Keep questioning the shadows.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.